Growing your own food doesn't have to break the bank. With a little planning, creativity, and resourcefulness, you can create a thriving garden on a budget. Whether you have a large backyard, a small patio, or just a balcony, I'm going to break down how you can grow fresh organic produce without spending a fortune. If you're new around here, I'm Chai Ming, a garden designer and educator here in Los Angeles, California. I specialize in helping my clients and students grow food and flowers. So stick around for some expert gardening tips, sustainable solutions, and money-saving hacks that actually work to help you cultivate a thriving edible garden. So step 1, plan before you plant. I know it's really exciting, you want to start a garden and you want to go buy plants. Stop right there. Before buying any seeds, one of the best ways to save money on a garden is to plan first. Before buying any seeds or plants, take time to plan out your garden space. So here are a couple of things to consider. First, what does your family eat most? And if you're in a smaller space like me, focus on high yield and expensive to buy crops like tomatoes, lettuce, herbs, and leafy greens. Think about your space. Are you going to use container gardening because you have a small patio or you rent and you don't want to commit to raised beds? Or do you have a larger space and you can squeeze in raised beds? Growing in raised beds is my favorite way to grow because you have full control over the nutrients that are going to feed your plants in the raised bed. Another thing to consider is your climate. Do you know your grow zone? If not, go to Google. Type in your city, type in USDA grow zone. It should give you a number and a letter. Mine is zone 10B, and that zone will give you a high-level breakdown of what to expect throughout the season. I am in zone 10B, but I'm also really close to the beach, about a mile from the beach, so I have a coastal microclimate. Those are really important notes to take as you're planning out your space. And of course, sunlight and soil quality are right up there in things to consider. Sometimes in Southern California, full sun is actually too much depending on where you live and what time of year it is. So understanding where the sun rises and sets, that's east and that's west at my house, will affect how you place your plants. I mentioned soil. Are you planting directly in the ground? Do you need to amend that soil? I like to ask my new clients, how long have you been in your home? Has the soil been amended? Because you probably don't know what the prior owner did, and you can most likely assume if there wasn't a garden there already, it was not amended. Okay, step 2, it's getting a little bit more fun. Seeds are much cheaper than starting with seedlings, and you can get more plants for your money. To save even more though, you can do seed swaps with friends. You can also check your local area for seed libraries or free seed programs from your community. Here in Southern California, we don't have to start our seeds indoors. We can start them outside because we grow year-round. But if you don't have a lot of space and you want to get head starts, starting your seeds separately will maximize your yield. Now, the caveat with starting with seeds though, you might be very tempted to buy a ton of seeds. And then you might not use them all, or you might end up killing your seedlings. So you really need to gauge, do you want to nurture seeds to seedlings? I like to teach my clients to think about seeds versus seedlings and liken it to whether you want to raise a newborn or you want to start at the toddler stage. And if the baby analogy doesn't work for you, you can think about puppies and kittens if you want newborns or if you want them at about 6 months old. Another way to save money is to DIY and use upcycled materials. I use redwood. Redwood actually lasts the longest, as well as cedar. They can last anywhere from 8 to 10 years. Some of the garden beds that I have in my property are 5 years old. I've taken some old beds apart and upcycled them to make new beds. You don't need to buy brand new containers. You can also try online marketplaces and swaps where you might be able to get things for free or minimal costs. If you are upcycling, I will caution to not use materials that were not designed to be outside in your garden beds, specifically when you're dealing with edibles. For example, some people might use a hanger and think that they can upcycle that metal and put it into their raised garden bed. Now, we don't know what metal was used, we don't know the manufacturing process, and the last thing you want to do is use a piece of metal that was not processed to be outside and then it rusts and corrodes and all of the materials sheds from the metal that you just upcycled, thinking that it was good to use. I wouldn't recommend using plastic containers like milk cartons and things like that because at least in the Southern California sun, things get really, really hot and can melt. So when heat is applied to plastics, it breaks down. So I'm not an expert with plastics or anything like that, but I would err on the side of caution to not upcycle those types of materials in your garden. Another way to garden on a budget is to make your own soil and fertilizer. You can very easily save your kitchen scraps and bury them into your raised beds to naturally decompose. You can start a compost, or you can even get some worms and start vermicomposting. I've seen a ton of hacks saying how good banana peels are, or eggshells, or coffee grounds are for your garden, and true, but there is a small step. Ideally, those items are first composted down and then fed to your plants. What happens is if those things are decomposing in your garden beds, it's taking nitrogen out of the soil in order to break down. So ideally, those are fantastic materials to let it compost or let worms break it down for you and then add that back into the garden. If you have compost, you can stretch that compost and make compost tea to feed your plants. You can use it as a foliar spray to ward off pests naturally as well. If you're in an area like me where you don't typically get a lot of rain, except for today, you're most likely paying for the water that you need to water your plants with. So there are a few ways to save water. One is to collect rainwater when you can. When it comes to edibles, you do need to pay attention to whether it's the first rain, because that means all the debris that has been collecting since the last rains has been sitting on your roofs. And when that first rain comes, all that gunk is going into your collection bin. Ideally, you just have open buckets, not from a roof, to get the cleanest rainwater for your plants. You can use mulch to maintain moisture. I actually like to use mushroom compost inside the bed. I like to use mushroom compost because it's often broken down grain materials, and mushrooms have spent all the nutrients inside and really broken that block down more. But it also soaks up a lot of moisture and helps keep things evenly moist inside the bed. You want to water early in the morning or late in the evening to avoid evaporation from the sun. So even though implementing a drip irrigation system might be a small investment up front, over time you will be saving money because the water is being delivered specifically to where you want it and there isn't much excess. If you have a sprinkler system, it could be overshooting, there could be all these other issues, but having a drip system really just delivers exactly what is needed. Most systems these days, you can actually monitor how much water is being used. So far we talked about starting with a plan, starting from seed, doing DIYs and upcycled materials, making your own soil and fertilizer. We just talked about being water wise, and now for more plants. You want to focus on growing perennials and easy to maintain crops. Herbs are a fantastic way to start. Most of the plants, especially here in Southern California, they come back year after year, season after season. That way you're not planting more seeds and you're not buying more plants. Herbs like rosemary, thyme, mint, oregano, parsley, they will last a while. Vegetables like Swiss chard and asparagus and sometimes kale and collard greens will last many years. One of the best investments, planting berries such as strawberries, blackberries, raspberries is fantastic because they will continue growing. You actually have to contain your vining berries because they will spread. If you're really keen on gardening on a budget, you can join local gardening groups for free advice and plant swaps. Of course, you can use free online resources like my own channel here, as well as a lot of my friends. As far as I know, gardeners love to share. So I would definitely check your online community groups for gardening groups near you. One last way to maximize your gardening budget is to practice companion planting and succession planting. Companion planting is managing your garden using plants that are known to work well together in yield as well as pest control. As for succession sowing, that means you are starting the next set of seeds or seedlings as the ones you first planted are finishing up. That way you're increasing productivity and never leaving any bare soil. So with that said, a budget-friendly edible garden is totally possible. You might need to be a little creative and do some planning, but by starting seeds and using upcycled materials, making your own compost, being water-wise, you can grow fresh organic food without a hefty price tag. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned gardener, these sustainable and cost-effective methods will help you cultivate an abundant harvest. In my next video, I'm going to break down the best return on investment for winter crops. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next one.